Great. Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the International Polar Bear Day Google Hangout. My name is Elisa McCall, and I'm with Polar Bears International, and I'm joined by some really great panelists today that live and work in polar bear country. So the theme of our International Polar Bear Day Challenge for polar bears is the thermostat challenge, and that's one reason that we're all wearing our toques right now. We're keeping warm in different ways, turning down our thermostat by a degree or two, but having a really good time doing it. Keeping cool and saving money does not have to be a hard thing to do. It can be lots of fun. So today we are going to be taking questions throughout the entire broadcast. So if you have questions for our panelists, please let us know. You can email us at questions@pbears.org. Or you can just type your question into the chat window on Polar Bear TV, which is on Polar Bear International's website, /Save Our Sea Ice. So questions at PBears or in the chat window, and we will get those answers out to our panelists for you. And we're going to be talking for about 30 to 40 minutes today. We're just going to be giving a background on what everyone does, what kind of science they do, what their jobs are like, and we're also going to talk a bit about polar bears, of course. So thank you again for joining us. So let's do a bit of an introduction to our panelists. So maybe we could start up at the Churchill Northern Studies Centre, where we have our two panelists. Maybe Heather and Daniel, could you introduce yourselves to everyone and tell us a little bit about what you guys do there?
Sure. Yeah. I guess I'll go first. Yeah, so my name is Daniel Gibson, and I'm a research technician at the Study Centre here in Churchill. So a bit of a background on the Study Centre. It's a research facility where we facilitate research to scientists that come up to the Churchill area, and they can do various things, and we help them with whatever they want to do. And then we also have the other side of the coin is our learning vacation. So we do research and education at the same time. So that's a really exciting part for me. I get to be a part of talking to people like you guys and the general public that come into the Study Centre. So yeah, you can visit our Facebook, our website, as well as our Facebook page for more information on that. And my job here at the Study Centre is a technician job, so I get to be involved in lots of the science that goes on and do a little bit of science myself, which you might hear about later, and it's pretty fun.
My name is Heather McLeod, and I'm the interpretive coordinator for Wapusk National Park. I work for Parks Canada, and I live in Churchill year-round. And the big part of my job is educating people about Wapusk National Park and the surrounding Churchill area. And I see we've got a web shot of our website here, and you can see the park. Pretty good detail there. And yeah, that's what I do. I get to go into the park in the summertime. I get to fly by helicopter and fixed-wing aircraft and by snowmobile, and I think I have the best job in the world.
Nah.
Maybe not?
I'll fight you.
That's awesome. I think everyone on the call here is pretty lucky to have really fun jobs, so that's really great. And Stefan Peterson also has a really great job, and Stefan is actually coming to us from the Assiniboine Park Zoo from the polar bear exhibit. So we're going to unmute Stefan, and he can tell us a little bit about what he does there and a bit about the park.
Yeah, welcome everyone. So I'm the head of conservation and research at Assiniboine Park Zoo, and so that means I get to do a whole range of really interesting sorts of things. And the big part that I really enjoy is every spring I usually go north of Winnipeg up to Churchill and stay at the Churchill Northern Studies Centre and do research on ring seals and harbor seals. So I don't really think of Winnipeg as being that far north, but luckily my field work really gets me to where the true north is. So that's really great. And so we're here in the Journey to Churchill exhibit. Behind me are the tunnels. There may or may not be a bear that drops in there and distracts us all. We can't really control what they do, but if they do, then that'll be a nice little surprise for us.
Definitely, and we'll switch over if we have a bear visitor, absolutely. Thanks, Stefan. So maybe to get the kind of ball rolling in this Google Hangout right now, I was wondering if, Heather, could you give us maybe a bit of an idea of where Churchill is in the world, within Canada, and a bit about the role of Wapusk National Park?
Sure. Let's start with the first question on the location of Wapusk National Park. It's located in the province of Manitoba, which is in the center of Canada, and it's located 1,000 kilometers north of the provincial capital city of Winnipeg, which is about 625 miles north of Winnipeg, on the coast of Hudson Bay. And it's very remote. There are no roads into Churchill. And as a result, we either have to fly in or we have to take a 2-day train journey from Winnipeg to arrive in Churchill. So it makes it very challenging for people to get to Churchill to visit us, and challenging for people to get into the park because, like Churchill, there are no roads into Wapusk National Park. So as I mentioned earlier, I go in by snow machine or helicopter or by airplane to get to the park. And what was your second question, sorry?
Oh, well, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about, like, what is the role of having a park there? Why do you have a park there, and what sorts of things does Parks Canada do with that park?
Okay, Parks Canada nationally has a plan to have one national park to represent each of the different natural regions we have in Canada, and Wapusk National Park represents the Hudson James Bay lowlands, which is a low-lying area around Hudson and James Bay. And it was chosen to represent that area for several reasons. One of them is that it has a lot of water on it, which is great for migratory birds. It's a very important peatland, part of one of the world's largest continuous peatlands. But most people associate the park with polar bears, and the park has one of the world's largest maternal denning areas within the park boundaries. And that's probably one of the most important reasons why this park was established.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, there's some really wonderful polar bear research that's been going on in Wapusk National Park for decades now. That's really taught us a lot about polar bears as a whole. Really, we've learned more about those polar bears than any other polar bears in the world, so it's been really special. And Heather, what does Wapusk mean?
Wapusk is the Swampy Cree dialect word for white bear, or polar bear.
So it's very appropriate name. And I'm just going to do a quick screen share. So for those of you that maybe are curious as to what this place looks like, one of the really great things that is offered, thanks to Parks Canada, thanks to the Churchill Northern Studies Centre, thanks to Explore.org, and thanks to Frontiers North Adventures, are multiple live cams that are set up throughout the park area. And those cams are definitely live throughout the summer and the fall during the polar bear migration. And of course, right now, the polar bears are out on the sea ice. But this cam, mounted at the Churchill Northern Studies Centre, is live right now. It's actually a Northern Lights cam, so tune in the evening if you want to see any lights. But it's also giving you a great idea of where Heather and Daniel are right now. It's still pretty white up there, even though a lot of Canada is pretty darn warm. I'm in Edmonton right now, and it's +9 here today. It's crazy, but it looks like you guys still definitely have a little bit of snow and white going on.
It's actually warm here, too.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? What's the temperature there?
I think it's about like -20 today.
Yeah, -18 was the forecast.
Yeah.
And it's warm.
Yeah, so usually I do my park outside. I was just wearing like 2 thin layers while I was outside today. Like,
wow. That is crazy. Oh, well, thank you so much, Heather. Maybe we'll pop over to Stefan for a minute. And Stefan, you mentioned that you do field work in Churchill in the summer and the spring. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what the Churchill ecosystem is like, and maybe some of the changes. Well, we just talked about the maybe unseasonably warm temperatures right now, but maybe a few of the longer term changes that people have been noticing in that region.
Sure, yeah. So the Churchill is just a really amazing place to go and do research because it has a whole variety of different ecosystems that you can tap into. So I work a lot on the marine ecosystem and in the estuary, which is where freshwater and marine waters are meeting and mixing, and it makes for a very productive kind of area. We have tundra around Churchill, and we also have right at the edge of the tree line, so we have lots of scrubby brush and trees. So it really creates for a really diverse community that you can go and study. And over time, we see this amazing variability in the weather. So we have really hot days when it's kind of weird. When we go up in the spring, we have to prepare for anything from blizzards to, plus 20-degree weather, which is challenging to kind of pack your clothes for that sort of trip when anything could happen. But over the longer term, what we've been seeing in the last 20 or 30 years is an extension of the open water season. So we see more often years where breakup is a lot earlier than it was before, and then over on the other end of it, we have longer falls. So freeze up is occurring later. So this has been a trend that's been going over for a couple of decades now, and why it also makes Churchill a really great place to study things, because we have these changes and we can look at how different species are responding to those changes. So I know for my research, I'm looking at harbor seals, which are normally a more temperate species, but they do occur in the Arctic, and they don't maintain breathing holes in the ice during the winter, so they're just not quite as adapted to the Arctic as their kind of sister species, which is the ring seals, which can maintain breathing holes in ice. So what I'm interested in is, as we get a longer open water season or warmer winters with less ice or more cracks in the ice, that should make it better for harbor seals, but at the same time make it not as good for ring seals that have really adapted to that Arctic ecosystem. So watching how these different populations respond is, for scientists, really, really exciting. And there's lots of scientists that go to Churchill because they have this great place that's set up to look at how these things might be changing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. And with the ring seal changes, of course, that's one of the main prey species for polar bears. And so it's really this whole ecosystem shift. It's not just one species or the other, but everything affecting each other. And I think if anyone's looking over Stefan's shoulder in the back, you're going to see glimpses of a polar bear visitor, but we'll see a bit closer. Stefan, I was wondering if you could maybe just briefly, I think the research you do with seals, the technology you use is really interesting. Could you just talk briefly about what kind of technology you're using to study these seals?
Yeah, so we seem to add a new toolkit to our toolbox every single year. So the exciting kind of toolbox that we're going to add this year is going to be a UAV, because we're really interested in body condition, but we don't want to handle animals as much as possible. We want them to behave naturally and really go about their business without a lot of influence for us. So we're hoping to be able to just take pictures of them and then measure how long they are. If we can get photo ID, so ring seals and harbor seals have markings on them that we hope we can be able to use to identify them. So that's the new toolkit that I'm looking forward to using this year. And then in past years, we've worked with the Churchill Northern Studies Centre and the technicians there to use these gigapan photos to monitor the estuary when we can't be there. So they're basically a camera on a little robot that takes really high-resolution picture of the whole panorama of the estuary. And so the technicians will go out and set that up on a nice day, take a big picture, mesh it all together, and then I can get a student down in the south here to go in and play rocker seal, and they just zoom in and count all of the seals that are in there. So we get these nice trends of how harbor seals are using that estuary throughout the entire year when we can't always be up there.
That's really cool. Really neat use of technology, and we're finding more and more as technology grows and gets a bit cheaper. There's just all these really amazing ways that different groups are using different types of technology. And maybe that's a good time for me too to mention the Google expeditions that launched just yesterday. So Google Street View and Street Mapping have gone up to Churchill a couple times now, and you can actually go online and visit different parts of Churchill, including a Parks Canada Centre, Wapusk National Park, and the Churchill Northern Studies Centre, and you can just go through these things. You can click around, you can see polar bears. There's also curriculum for students. It's just really exciting. So we'll be doing more about that next week with Google too, so stay tuned. But if you guys want to take your own virtual tour, please check that out because it is awesome. So I'm going to pop over to Daniel for a second. Daniel, you actually work at the Study Center, and we've all been talking about what a wonderful resource this place is for any scientists that are visiting. I've stayed there on multiple occasions to do research. You do research from there year-round. You guys do your own research, and then you support all these different projects from other people. Can you talk a bit about what the Study Center's role is in research in the park, both what you specifically do and then kind of big picture stuff, whatever you think people should know about? I know there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, there's tons of things. So maybe if I'm running off on a rabbit trail, you can reel me in.
Sure.
We like to talk about it as 3 different kinds of research that we do at the Study Center. So one of it, as a science staff, one of them is we actually do our own research. We have projects. My boss is a PhD. She has all this science background, and she actually does her own research projects, and we help out with that, and we actually do science in and of ourselves. And then the other thing we do is when scientists come in, they can do their research, and we just help them out with whatever they need. So that's pretty cool. And then the third part of it is more out there a little bit more, is the scientists come in, set up their research, and then give it to us to do. So they've set up the whole project. We didn't have to do much of the thinking about it. We just do the actual hard labor or data collection or things like that, which is super fun, because then I don't have to do much work. I just have to enjoy the fun field data collection, which is really fun. An example of one of our research projects is snow sampling. So I was actually just out in Wapusk National Park last week, and it was pretty cold. We talked about the warm weather today, but over the last week it's been pretty cold. It was about -30 temperature the whole time I was in the park for the 4 days, and then there's wind chill on top of that. So it was like -45 Celsius a lot of the time. And I did get some frostbite on my nose, if you can see that on the spent too much time outside in the cold wind. But yeah, so this particular project, we went out to Wapusk to sample the snow, to characterize the snowpack. And the purpose of that is to see if there's differences in the amount of snow, the kind of snow, the hardness of the snow between different locations, and then between different years. So like we can look at consecutive years and see if there's differences in trends. So it's really good when you're talking about climate change and looking at trends and seeing how climate actually affects the down-to-earth snow pack here in Churchill, and that's pretty interesting and fun to be involved with too.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds like. Another thing I wanted people to know about, so I talked a little bit before about that Northern Lights cam that is hosted at the Study Center. That's been a huge hit online, both for the Northern Lights and for the visiting gyrfalcon that you guys get quite often. But you guys also support a lot of research for the Northern Lights, and I think that's one where a group, is it from Dartmouth? They have a program going, and you guys help support the data collection for that to learn more?
Yep, that's true. What can I say about that? I haven't actually met the guy. He set up this project quite a while ago, and we've just been monitoring it ever since I've been here. And basically they have 5 antennas that continuously monitor the solar activity that causes the Northern Lights, which is pretty cool. So there's data being collected on a continuous basis of the activity of the aurora borealis. It's not like taking video of it at all times, but it's actually measuring the source of the aurora, which is really cool. And they put those data that they collect into different models to be able to predict the forecast for people who come up to watch the Northern Lights here at the Study Center. So some of our learning vacations and tourists that come up, they want to see the Northern Lights, so they go online and find an app that helps to predict whether there's going to be good Northern Lights at that particular time. So they don't have to get up at every hour of the night. They only have to get up at 2 o'clock. All the hours.
I'm sure they really appreciate that. And I think scientists all over the world, it sounds like we're all pretty darn lucky that you guys are there both as a wonderful place to stay and as, you know, researchers that are able to support all this research. So that's very cool stuff. I think one question that everyone kind of wants to know from all of you, so maybe I'll start with Heather again and then Steph and then back to Daniel, is a question about your field work. What's your favorite part of being in the field? And then also, do you ever worry about maybe polar bears being around? And I'm sure that depends on the type of year or how you stay safe maybe in polar bear country. Heather, what do you really enjoy about your field work?
Well, for me, it's getting into the park. I mean, I work and live in Churchill, and the park is located about 40 kilometers to the east of Churchill. And getting into the park, getting feet on the ground is my favorite part of the job because of the wildlife. Wildlife viewing is something I love to do in my spare time, and to be able to do that for a job is pretty sweet. Probably the second thing that I love about my job is watching people connect with nature in the park. And for a lot of Manitoba youth, that may be the first time they've had that connection, and they get unconnected from their iPod, their iPhones, and all their technology, and they get really connected with nature. And I really see it happening before my very eyes, and then once we leave the park, I hear them reflecting on their experience. A week later, a month later, even years later, how much of an impact being out in that park had on their personal development. So for me, that really gives me a lot of motivation. So I love that. About polar bears and polar bear safety, whenever we're in the park, we take with us somebody who's a trained polar bear monitor or polar bear guard, somebody who's trained with a firearm, that knows the park, that knows polar bear behavior, and it takes the lead on polar bear safety. Anytime you're in a remote area, you have to be extra safe, but certainly add some large carnivores in there, and you know, you have to be doubly safe. If we overnight in the park, we stay in a facility that is surrounded by a bear-proof fence, so everyone gets a really good night's sleep.
Which is where I was staying.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Heather. Stefan, maybe we'll pop over to you. What's your favorite part of field work, and then do you ever have to keep an eye out for polar bears? Even, well, you work there often in the summer too, so you probably definitely do need to keep an eye out.
Yeah, most of my work is really in the spring, and I love the spring. It's the best part because there's no bears and no bugs. It's not really true, but for the most part, lots of birds. Beluga come in a little bit later, but the important thing is no bugs and very few bears. But the trouble is it can lull you into a false sense of security because bears can show up anywhere at any time. So we always still have to be really careful. We get training before we go up. We get more training from the staff at the Churchill Northern Studies Centre. And then we always have to make sure that, so a lot of times we'll be staring at seals and looking at their behavior. And you can really get engrossed staring down, you know, a spotting scope or through your binoculars and forget to pop your head up like a meerkat and kind of check the horizon for predators. So we always have to make sure that we have someone that part of their duty is to, keep their head up and look around and make sure that everyone's going to be safe and we can see where bears are a long way away and get out of their way if we see them coming down the path. So.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, we can see one of your visitors just kind of floating above your head right now. Yeah, they're a big animal, but they sure can be quiet when they're, you know, trying to sneak up or investigate something. So good to be aware of. Pretty
and
cool.
They move fast. They have like a lumbering sort of gait that is very, very deceiving. And so they're far away, and then suddenly they're quite close. And if you're not used to that, it can take you by surprise for sure.
Yes, I have definitely also experienced that, and I've acted as a bear monitor before in the field, and you really can't keep your guard down at all because before you're just scanning for minutes at a time and there's nothing, and then before you know it, there's a polar bear pretty darn close. It's quite amazing actually how quick they are.
Yeah.
How about you, Daniel? What's your favorite part of fieldwork? You get to do quite a variety year-round of field work, and how do you guys deal with polar bears at different times of the year?
Yeah, so my favorite part of fieldwork, kind of have to think about that a lot because I do love most of it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm a bit of a birder, so I really like birds. Just being out in the field and being able to see the birds, like the migratory birds that come up in the spring, they're very cool, and seeing all the interesting birds that are around. So that's one very good part of my job as a technician. The other part of my job that I really like is being able to take out groups and learning vacations, school groups, take them out into the field. And I guess this isn't really field work when you're talking about science and data collection, but it's definitely part of my job. We take out groups to show them around the landscape and get them excited about things. And I guess that's very similar to what Heather does. But we get to like give them a plant seminar or take them out sampling aphids, which is one of the things that we're doing in the past. Get them to do a little bit of science and then actually get them to collect the data and analyze it later. So it's just kind of being able to communicate the love of science, which is really fun.
Yeah, that sounds really great. And we have a question that maybe, Daniel, you can answer. So this is from Sherry, and this is really cool because Sherry actually visited Churchill last bear season, and I met her on the beach in Churchill by the Inukshuk and had a great chat, and it was really nice to meet her. As Sherry, I definitely remember you. I think you were there around it even says you were there on Halloween, because I remember I looked for you that night in the seaport, but I never did see you again. So Sherry is asking a question for Daniel, or for actually anyone that has any other ideas, how can people get involved as a volunteer in Churchill, or doing anything with the polar bears or visiting? How do people become a part of that sort of stuff you're talking about? And I know the Study Center does take volunteers occasionally.
Yeah, the volunteer program at the Study Center is more of the housekeeping and kitchen part of it. So you can come here and volunteer at the Study Center to help out with the operations, and then sometimes you do get to go out into the field a little bit. To actually help volunteer with the science, that's a bit difficult. If you get on some sort of school group trip, that's a good way of doing that. I don't know. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I don't know that there's any programs really other than the Churchill Northern Studies Centre program. The volunteer program is pretty popular, and you can come at a variety of times of the year. You can come in bear season, you can come during the aurora season, you come during the summertime. And one of the advantages of coming in the summer to the Churchill Northern Studies Centre is that there's a lot of researchers here, so there's lots of opportunities to learn more and network. But right now, with Parks Canada, we have volunteer programs in other parts of the country, but we don't yet have anything established for Wapusk National Park. But hopefully, perhaps in the future, that would change.
I do actually have something on this too. Being a volunteer at the Study Center is useful for sure. We do like to have that help, but probably more of a help that many of you guys who are listening now could be is actually just being advocates for the science that happens here. And if you come up to the Study Center on one of our learning vacations or something like that, you can be involved in the research and learn what's going on and then go home and talk about it, go home and spread the word. So that's probably you would be much more useful doing that.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, and that's something that PBI really loves too, and that's one of the reasons we do things like the Thermostat Challenge on Polar Bear Day, and there will be another challenge on Arctic Sea Ice Day in July. But it's really, in this day and age with all the social media that goes on and the sharing of everything, just the word of mouth information is so huge and exciting, and the more people that can talk about it and tell their friends and share things on Facebook or whatever, it's really cool. So I definitely encourage all of you who are interested in polar bears or the North or Churchill or anything, just to talk about it and learn about it. And there's lots of great resources out there. So that's a really great question, and thank you so much, Sherry, for asking that. I think we have a lot of students watching us today, and so another question that I'm hoping all the panelists can touch on briefly is, how did you get involved in your line of work? You all have such cool jobs, and I feel like I have a great job too. We're really lucky, but a lot of work goes into that. Can you all talk a little bit about how you came to the job you came to? And maybe, Stefan, can we start with you for that? How did you become the head of maybe explain what you are and what you do briefly again.
Sure, I'm trying to lean back so that the contrast changes and you can see bears in the background. I hope I'm still audible. So yeah, so I think I took a fairly kind of traditional academic path to get to where I am, but I don't think it's the only path to get to where I am and what I get to do. So I started out really interested in shrews, which are a tiny little insectivore that's a super predator, just on a very, very small scale. And then I've kind of worked my way up in body size. So I did that in Alberta, but then I went to Nova Scotia in Canada and studied flying squirrels, which are the cutest squirrels ever. And then from there, I moved to Ontario, and really that's when I started studying the big Arctic mammals. So I was doing work on ring seals and polar bears and Peary caribou, so a caribou that lives in the high Arctic of Canada. And from there, I was enjoying that. I did mostly lab work looking at genetics, but I really wanted to get into the field again. So I came to Winnipeg and worked with Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and that got me into the high Arctic and studying killer whales and beluga and narwhal, which are mind-blowingly awesome. And then from there, I came to the zoo. So I think having a little bit of everything in my background really set me up to have a good, be in a good position here at the zoo, where we have a collection of animals that ranges from insects to fish to birds to mammals, and being able to use genetics to answer questions about all those species, and then also having that my focus on Arctic, just kind of, it was a perfect fit at the perfect time for me. So everything really came together.
Oh, that's really cool. And those polar bears are putting on a great show in the background. So yeah, you've had quite a lead up to that role. And similarly to you, I started studying deer mice when I was in undergraduate university, and I did my bachelor's degree on deer mice and then worked on toads for a while before jumping up to polar bears. So, you know, there's definitely more than one path to polar bears. Maybe we could hop over to Heather and Daniel again, and you guys could briefly talk about how you came in to your jobs now.
Sure. I did not have a plan. I started out in science and university at Trent University, and then I jumped right into the aviation industry, and I was a flight attendant for many years, traveling the world. And after the 9/11 happened, the aviation industry collapsed. I went back to school and got my Bachelor of Education and started looking for jobs in the North, and I ended up working at the Churchill Northern Studies Centre. And from there, I went over to Parks Canada. So it was a bit of a convoluted plan, but Churchill was always on my bucket list of a place that I wanted to work or live. Mm-hmm. So yeah, living the dream.
Cool. Nice. Daniel?
Yeah, so my story is a bit short, but interesting. I've always been interested in animals, and I always wanted to study animals in the future. So I went to school for zoology for my undergrad, and that's basically that's the only education I've had so far. So I started studying aphids. I mentioned that before. Aphids were my undergrad research project. So the small insects, and even though birds are my favorite thing. And then after my second year of university, I came up to Churchill just as a summer student, a summer intern position, and it was really fun. It was just, I had not much obligation to stay in the future. It just came for the summer and just to see what it was like. And what's kind of interesting about my story is my intention was always to move to the jungle and work in South America or something like that. And I came to Churchill like, oh, I'll get a field job just because that's in my field. And then I was like, wow, I love this environment. It's beautiful. It's so unique. There's lots of birds. It was very cool. So I kind of fell in love with the Arctic, even though my intention was to go to the jungle. Crazy.
Oh, that's funny. Well, here's a good question for you then, because this question came in from Annie. How do you guys survive these cold temperatures when you're doing field work? What does that entail, keeping warm?
You wear lots of clothes.
Yeah.
Layers. Lots of layers, and you always bring extra gear in case your gear gets wet. extra pair of gloves. If you only have one pair and you lose a pair, it's a disaster when you're far away from home and it's minus 40. So yeah, lots and lots of layers, and you make sure that you check each other for frostbite and for frostnip, because sometimes the signs and symptoms are only obvious to somebody who's looking at you. So we kind of keep an eye out for each other, make sure that we're warm and well hydrated, and if we start getting a little bit loopy because we're getting cold, it's time to warm up.
There wasn't enough people looking at my nose this past week.
Not.
Oh, your poor nose. And
So it's fine.
oh man. And Stefan, we have a question for you. Are the seals in their natural habitat afraid or shy of humans?
They're definitely wary of people. In a lot of the Canadian Arctic, there's Inuit people that hunt them as part of their culture and their way of living and their life. So most seals kind of know that humans might want to not be super close to them all the time. There's in different places, there's different responses. So in Churchill, at where the harbor seals are hauling out, they're pretty fine. No one really approaches them that often. They feel pretty safe. So we don't really go that close to them because we want them to have all their normal behaviors. But they seem perfectly okay with us sitting, a couple hundred meters back looking at them through spotting scopes. And then in the spring when we're up, we also see lots of ring seals out on the ice basking. And so they're really cool to watch because they'll kind of be, you think, asleep and completely dead to the world, and then they'll pop their head up and take a look around, and they just get this little mosaic of heads popping up to check out, make sure there's no one coming close. But I think that's more because they're worried about polar bears than they're worried about people. Really, the big predator and the thing they have to be concerned about is polar bears.
Right. Thanks for that, Stefan. And thanks to all our panelists today. Thanks to the Churchill Northern Studies Centre, Parks Canada, and the Assiniboine Park Zoo. You guys were wonderful today. We're already at 40 minutes almost. The time just flies. Stefan, I'm going to keep the camera on you while I do my wrap-up, just because you've got such great polar bear activity. But before I start my wrap-up, do you guys have anything, like final comments you want to say at all? Stefan?
No, I think people should be getting excited about International Polar Bear Day. That's tomorrow. We have some cool things happening at the zoo tomorrow. If you're in Winnipeg, we have a local artist who loves polar bears, just loves them, and has come in and done full-size cutouts of all our bears that we'll put up, and people can kind of measure how big they are compared to bears, and gives it a chance for us to talk about polar bear research and how people can turn down the thermostat or do other things. So get excited about International Polar Bear Day tomorrow, I think, is all I have to say.
Awesome. Thanks, Stefan. And over to Heather and Daniel. Any final comments for our viewers today?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to all the students and anyone who's watching today. We really appreciate your interest in Churchill and your support for the polar bears. So thanks very much for tuning in.
Thanks.
I just wanted to give one little tidbit of information. We have a polar bear researcher coming up next week. He's a federal scientist, Dr. Nick Lunn, and he's coming up to study the polar bears coming out of their dens. So if you're thinking about Polar Bear Day tomorrow, if you're talking to somebody else, spread the word. The polar bears in Churchill are coming out of their dens right now.
That is awesome, Daniel, because I was going to just mention that, so it's perfect timing. Yeah, the spring research program every spring, also teaching us a lot about polar bears. So yeah, it's a great time of year for polar bears. Those moms coming out with their new cubs, very, very exciting. Cool that you get to be there and talk to Nick. He's a great guy. Yeah, so thanks everyone. And the reason we do our thermostat challenge is simply because the world's getting warmer. So naturally our atmosphere acts like a blanket around the Earth, and the gases in the atmosphere trap heat and keep us nice and warm. But human activities create these rampant amount of excess gases like carbon dioxide, and we simply thicken the Earth's blanket, and we're making Earth too warm too quickly. And of course, you have a warm summer's day, ice in your glass, it melts. So the sea ice is being affected by a warmer Earth. But we can absolutely change that. January 2016 just broke the record for the least amount of sea ice in January. So let's reverse that trend. We know, based on really cool science, that if we reverse the warming trend, or at least stop it or slow it, then the sea ice will come back and we'll keep that Arctic home for polar bears. So there's 19 subpopulations of polar bears around the world. Some are still doing just fine because the sea ice hasn't changed much in their habitat, but we know other polar bears that are seeing changes in their habitat are being impacted, just like any animal that has habitat impacts. And so one of the ways that we can prevent this from happening, because like Stefan also mentioned, it's not only polar bears that need sea ice, it's seal species, it's other fish species, it's microorganisms that live on and in sea ice. They all need that Arctic sea ice home, and us humans also need it too. Sea ice really regulates the Earth's temperature. So if we can reduce the amount of emissions that we're putting in the atmosphere, then we can help make sure that sea ice lasts really, really long time, which we all want. And so one of the ways we can do this is by turning down our thermostat a couple degrees, and it also saves us money, so win-win. We also wanted to tell you guys about a couple tools. So we mentioned the explore.org cams. If you tune in, maybe you'll be able to see some polar bears coming back on shore in the spring or summer, but you can definitely now take a look at what's going on in Churchill and the Northern Lights, so that's pretty cool. We also mentioned the Google expeditions. If you want to go explore the tundra and see polar bears, please take a look at that. We also have the Polar Bears International Bear Tracker, so go online on the polarbearsinternational.org website, look up our bear tracker, and we've got multiple collared female bears in Hudson Bay right now. You can see where they are. There's quite a range of different locations. It's pretty neat. You can track them throughout the year, see where they're moving on the hunt for seals. And of course this time of year is really special because those moms are about to break out of their dens and go to the ice with their brand new cubs. So it's all really, really exciting stuff. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to all our panelists. Thanks to explore.org for the cams, and Frontiers North Adventures and Canada Goose for being such wonderful supporters. If you guys have more questions, we're always willing to answer your polar bear questions at questions@pbears or on our website, or just reach out to us if you'd like to get in touch with someone and we will get that information to you. So thanks so much, and happy International Polar Bear Day tomorrow. Keep an eye on social media. We've got fun about polar bears and their sea ice home, and it should be a lot of fun. So thanks everyone. Thanks again to the panelists. You guys are great, and we will, I'm sure, be in touch really soon.
It's great to be involved.
Great. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much. Bye. Bye, everybody.